What's happening, Bills Mafia? Ryan Thomas here for a very special edition of the Thomas Take Sports Podcast. I am joined by, and I'm not just saying this because he's on my show, but for my money, the best Bills beat writer in the area today, Ryan Talbot of NYUp.com. Thanks for joining me, Ryan.
Hey, thanks for the kind words. And yeah, my pleasure to finally connect with you and get on the show.
Yeah, not only are you a Buffalo Bills beat writer, you have the right rooting interest for the NFL, but judging the hoodie there, you're rooting for the right college team as well. I didn't
Yeah,
know that you were an ND fan.
yeah, I'm a diehard ND fan. I'm a little bit worried about this playoff game coming up here. I've reached the point. I've reached that point where I'm like, I don't know if they're ever going to have one of those premier quarterbacks in college just based on their standards. But I'm hoping they can give Alabama a game. And I actually have grass clippings from the 1988 season, the last time that that they won it all. And
wow,
someone passed that down to me, and I thought that was kind of neat to have a unique memento. Needless to say.
that's beautiful. That's the stuff that makes football so special when it's passed down from generation to generation. I talked about that on the show in the aftermath of this AFC's title, first AFC's title in 25 years. I thought, what would my grandpa think? Watching this um, amazing season that we've witnessed here in 2020 for the Buffalo Bills. And I want to recap it with you on the show. So this is the Buffalo Bills 2020 season recap with Ryan Talbot. And honestly, I have to say, Ryan, I didn't expect a 12-3 season. I don't know if anybody expected it. Did you expect the Buffalo Bills to emerge on the scene like they have this season?
I don't think I came out here and said 12-3 or even 12-4 at the end of the year. I think I was closer to that 10-6, 11-5 mark, just because of the schedule on paper. When you were entering this year, you looked at it and you said, man, there's a few West Coast trips on that schedule. There's some primetime games. And then obviously a lot of the uncertainty with what was going on in the world with COVID in terms of how that could affect your week-by-week schedule. I thought that finishing at 10-6 would be an accomplishment, even though it would have matched their record from 1 year ago. I thought the schedule was harder on paper than what they faced last year with the NFC East and a lot of those other games. But the fact that they're 12-3 just goes to show you, one, obviously this is a much better team than 1 year ago, and two, the Bills are one of the best teams in the league based on what we've seen this season. So they've really come a long way from last year to now.
I agree. And we actually had a little bit of a season preview. I remember you were on the show when it was just available on the audio side of things. And we both spoke very highly of Josh Allen. And talking very highly of Josh Allen then, and looking back on that and looking at Josh Allen now and the state of his career, there is no doubt about it, Ryan. Josh Allen is a superstar now. You have all of the national media experts outside of Nick Wright giving Josh Allen his due, saying that this guy is legit. This guy is one of the better, up-and-coming quarterbacks in the league, I think, for many years to come, as do they. What have you seen from year one to year two to now year three in Josh Allen's career that really jumps out at you?
Well, the mechanics and the how far he's come along from there. You and I think both probably thought, and I don't want to speak for you, but I think we both thought Josh Allen was about here last year. And for the Bills to maintain success, you'd have to go a little bit higher. He's gone off the charts. You can't even, if you're watching on the video platform, you can't even see my hand anymore. He's gone off the charts this year in terms of what he's done. And it's a lot goes into that. But I think mechanics has been the biggest thing. And the work that he did with Jordan Palmer this offseason, where they looked at his mechanics, and the person that did the testing said, this doesn't make any sense in terms of how he tested, just because his arm was so strong on its own, but everything else was out of whack with the hip placement, and I'm obviously no quarterback guru or expert there, but they really went and they worked on that in terms of how he should be moving, and you've seen it pay off. Those balls where he would sail it high over the receiver's head, you're not really seeing that anymore. You're seeing from the pocket, I believe I read the metric that he was the most accurate quarterback in the NFL through 16 weeks with a clean pocket or throwing from the pocket. And I don't know if I ever thought I'd see that day either. So mechanics has been the big thing. I think that we've also seen the development from the mental aspect of things. And even though it was maybe one of his most underwhelming stat lines. I go back to that first Patriots game where
Right.
he was going up to the line and he was, kill, calling audibles up at the line based on what he saw. And each time he was calling the right play. And a lot of the times they were handoffs, but they were handoffs that went for big runs for Zach Moss and Devin Singletary, because in that first game, they really hurt New England on the ground. But seeing that, having him diagnose what he's seeing pre-snap is so big, because last year, the Bills were rushing to get up to the line so that way Brian Dable could kind of say things into the helmet. They had that little bit of time before the communication went out. And that's not a factor anymore. Now he's going up there and he's reading it. So you're seeing that. And then the last thing that I'm really impressed with, he's not taking off and running. That is no longer part of his game, where the first reaction to pressure is, I'm going to take off and run. Rookie year, absolutely what he started to do, because there was a lack of talent around him. Last year, they upgraded with John Brown, Cole Beasley. Still probably took off on some plays where if he would have let things develop, something would have opened up. And now it's the last scenario. It's the last thing he's going to do, unless it's a third and medium and he sees I can run and get move the chains here. He's really waiting things out into the last possible second. So really grown in every phase of the game.
I love what you touched on, though, his mentality. Body language, I think, is everything from year 2 to year 3 that I've noticed almost even within this third season. His body language approaching the line of scrimmage, getting under center or taking shotgun snaps, he just seems like he is so much more confident in his own skill set, more comfortable within the offense. And he talked about that a little bit yesterday. I'm paraphrasing here, but something to the tune of, Brian Dable would have to say the play, 3 or 4 times in order for him to kind of get the verbiage of it. Now it's just automatic. He knows what reads he needs to make on those particular plays. And you just see this offense playing such a fast pace. It goes back to the style that they had with, Kelly and stuff like that. And I think that is a little bit of nostalgia right now in this area that longtime Bills fans, my dad's generation, grandfather's generation, they do see some parallels. This is like the first prolific offense really that we've had since those Super Bowl years.
Yeah, you could probably throw in the one Bledsoe year where Peerless Price and Eric Moulds went off the charts, but even that was a completely different offense. Bledsoe couldn't run. If you gave him a 2-yard head start, he wasn't going to go very far. He was kind of a statue in the pocket throughout his career for the most part, but especially at that point in his career. But you had 2 great wide receivers and obviously a really good running game back then, defense. But you're right. This offense gives you more reminders of that Super Bowl era. Jim Kelly being compared to Josh Allen, and they don't necessarily have the running back, the Thurman Thomas of this unit. They have enough talent there in the running back room. Throw in a Josh Allen who's mobile and can run as well to help in that area. And then at wide receiver, Stephon Diggs is having the greatest single season in Bills history, and that's saying something when you've had Andre Reed and James Lofton, you've had Peerless Price and Eric Moulds, and you've had some other really good players along the way. So the fact that he's come in here year 1 and had this kind of year, it speaks volumes to this offense. It speaks volumes to the job that Brian Dable has done. I feel like Dable has been a good offensive coordinator all along. Just year 1, didn't have the talent, didn't have the pieces. Year 2, it got a little bit better. He's always been able to scheme guys open, but it makes it even easier when you have guys that can also get open off the line like a Cole Beasley can, right, like a John Brown can, obviously like a Stephon Diggs can. So it's all worked hand in hand really well together. And obviously, as we've said, the development of Josh Allen is what's really taken it to this next level.
And I do have to, and as I have, throughout this whole season, I have to paraphrase, throughout this whole season, I have had to tip my cap to Brian Dable. I was very frustrated just in terms of situational stuff from that Houston playoff game. Felt like with that 16-0 lead, Ryan, we should have won that game had we maybe drained the clock out a little bit more. Maybe that's a little nitpicky, but I was so stuck in that moment of losing that playoff game that I thought, well, what do we need? What is it that we need? What could we have on this team that makes us more dangerous? And it was that wide receiver 1. It was such a glaring hole on this roster, and Stephon Diggs has filled that role far better than I thought he would. I was excited. I was optimistic, but literally the greatest single season that statistically any Buffalo Bills wide receiver has ever had. that
Yeah,
Stephon Diggs has had in his first season. It's remarkable.
it is remarkable. And, he's talked a lot about trust and needing to build trust with his new team when he was traded from Minnesota. And I truly believe that Sean McDermott, Brendan Bean, Brian Dable sat him down and said, listen, we get the frustration. We get that you're coming out of a system that was very run heavy, and you have Dalvin Cook. There's a reason you're run heavy, and you have Kirk Cousins, who can win you ball games, but he is not that upper echelon type quarterback. So I get the frustration, but I also understand it from Minnesota's viewpoint. But I think they sat him down and they said, listen, we believe in Josh Allen. This is year 3. We saw him take a big step from year 1 to year 2, and we think that with you, we can be a really pass heavy offense, and we're going to funnel this offense through you. Mm-hmm. You're going to have to understand that there are going to be weeks, though, where defenses are going to go out of their way to try to shut you down, and then we're going to have to go to John Brown, go to Cole Beasley, go to some of the other these weapons. And to Diggs' credit, he's done that. He's talked in this season where he's said in games, hey, 15's open or Cole Beasley's open, get them the ball in these drives because of the way that they're covering me. And, according to Diggs, this all goes back, believe it or not, to those workouts in Florida where John Brown literally said, why don't you lead us? Why don't you get in front of the line? And that's really all it took for this relationship, this bond to grow in the wide receiver room. And now they're all working together. And, look out come playoff time because John Brown's coming back. You don't know the status of Cole Beasley, but I'd like to believe, week to week is generally anywhere from 2 to 4 weeks in my viewpoint, in my mind. I think he's going to do everything possible to be out there that first playoff game. And then if you add a Kenny Stills, even if it's a Kenny Stills that doesn't know the ins and outs of this offense, that's still another guy that can take the top off of a defense. And you have Gabriel Davis. The Bills are going to be passing early and often, even if it's in a blizzard, I have the feeling, come wild card weekend, and as far as they can go into the playoffs.
That would be amazing, just watching Josh Allen sling just lasers in blizzard-like conditions to Gabe Davis and Stephon Diggs, and hopefully Beasley gets healthy soon. I was going to ask you as well, where are we at? Being that you are, I truly believe, Ryan, you're the best insider as far as Buffalo Bills information. I love, watching you cover this team every season, so it's an honor to have you on the show. As far as Kenny Stills goes, though, where are we at as far as that goes? Is it looking like a done deal, or are we still kind of waiting and seeing?
Yeah, there's been no official confirmation, but I have a feeling it's as good of it's pretty much a done deal in my mind. And based on what I understand, as long as the COVID tests keep coming back negative, I think he's going to be on this roster sooner rather than later. And you've seen it on social media, you don't want to read too much into the Twitter of the world, but he's responding to Bills fans. He's liking tweets about joining the team and things like that. And that does not make it official by any stretch of the imagination. But when he asked for his release from Houston, he wanted to join a playoff team. And he's been sitting out there for a while now. So if the Green Bay Packers of the world or another contender wanted him at this point, he probably would have joined. I think there's been dialogue all along with the Bills and his agent. Sean McDermott said as much this morning that Brendan Beans had his eye on him all along. So I think that there's been conversations, and now the timing is right. And maybe it's not a separate Cole Beasley injury discussion while you're bringing him on now. Maybe it is playoff time. We want as many weapons as possible for Josh Allen. And you never know what's going to happen in January, injury-wise, things like that. It's better to have some options available than having to go to the practice squad and bring up a Duke Williams, not hypothetically, because last year that was your number one option in the playoff game based on targets at least. And you don't want to find yourself in that situation again. And that's no knock on Duke Williams, but looking at the talent that's in the room now and looking at a guy like Kenny Stills and what he's done over his career, you'd rather have those types of guys out there and available.
Yeah, I look at him as a very similar type player to John Brown. The more speed, it goes back to like Rocky 2. We need speed. Speed's what we need. When he's trying to rematch Apollo Creed, we're trying to take on the Apollo Creed, I guess you could say, of the NFL. That's the date with destiny to me. The Buffalo Bills and the Kansas City Chiefs. Where does that rank? Like, I think that's the marquee matchup that this 2020 season could offer. What do you think of that? This whole date with destiny with the Kansas City Chiefs?
Yeah, I think if the NFL could choose one matchup for the AFC Championship, that is what they would choose. I still think Pittsburgh is very flawed at this point in time. They have a ton of talent in the wide receiver room, but Roethlisberger does not look right. He does not look the same. He's having to hit those short passes more than not. A lot of teams are sitting on them now. You look at the rest of the way down, Tennessee, I think Tennessee has a ton of talent. I think they have the talent to go to a championship game. If you can get Baltimore in the playoffs, they're playing great football right now. And Lamar winning a few playoff games would be a great story. But every other team, every other viewpoint, I feel like there's a lot of the holes and flaws. The Browns defense, I don't have any belief that they could give the the Chiefs a serious game. Indianapolis, I don't believe Phillip Rivers can go head-to-head or toe-to-toe with Mahomes in terms of scoring points in a game, and the same can be said for most teams offensively. Can you go toe-to-toe with Patrick Mahomes on offense? Most no, but look at that Bills offense. I think they can. I truly believe that with all the weapons. And to anyone that goes back and points to Buffalo's head-to-head loss, one, Josh Allen was playing with an injury to his non-throwing shoulder nonetheless, but it did hamper and affect his play. The weather was not ideal, and who knows what the weather would be like in the AFC Championship, but that's something to keep in mind. So I would like to see him get another shot at that game and that matchup.
I completely agree. I mentioned this on the last show that I did in terms of what potentially needs to change for the Buffalo Bills heading into the playoffs. How can they win with what they have shown so far? What other areas of their team could they improve upon? Because they're not perfect yet. We're inching closer to where we need to be, but there's also room for improvement. I think in the run game, it goes to this whole theory that if you're playing in the playoffs, playing a playoff caliber team as your opponent, you do have to have more of a balanced attack to somewhat close out these games. And that's what I'm a little bit worried about. Do I have reason to be worried that, whether or not the Bills can close out games in the run department?
I think you have some validation to that concern just because we haven't seen the Bills have to lean on this run game all season. Right. It's usually been late in games. And to the running backs' credit, they've been able to sustain long drives and kill a lot of time off the clock in these last few games. The Pittsburgh game comes to mind. The Broncos game, that was a blowout pretty early in the third quarter, but they were running the ball pretty effectively there. And even to a certain extent, late in the game here against New England last week, they were running well. I think, though, you need to make that decision right now on who's going to be your bell cow back. And in my opinion, Zach Moss has been more effective as of late in this last 4-week window. Now, I'm not saying get Devin Singletary off the field altogether. He's a good change of pace guy. He can make you miss. He's a decent receiver out of the backfield. But if you're going to go with a back and get them into a rhythm, I want to see what Moss can do. I feel like he's done a nice job, especially in those short situations as of late. I know he was stopped on a fourth and 1 situation recently, but the viewpoint, I felt like that was just a bad spot in that game where their Bills were deep in that other opposing team's territory, and I feel like he actually got it. But that's a whole nother scenario. I feel like he's been good in the short game. I feel like he's showed some burst. I think his confidence has been built up as of late. So I'd like to see Moss get more there. And then the other thing is the run defense. Buffalo's run defense has been affected to a certain extent. Look at last week against New England. You've had them break off some decent runs early in the game. But then as the game went on, I feel like they kind of got more comfortable out there. They were stopping the run more effectively. But Buffalo's offense, scoring points, has also taken the run game away from a lot of these teams. So if you get into a playoff game, though, against a team like the Browns, for instance, I don't think Stefanski's going to go away from the run. I think he's going to keep going with that 1-2, the two-headed monster that he has there. And if Buffalo's run defense can't stop them, that's going to be a really interesting back and forth game. As much as I think Buffalo can throw all day against that defense, it would be interesting to see if Buffalo's run defense could eventually hold up and get them off the field without giving up points.
I completely agree. In terms of the pecking order of what is my most feared matchup, it honestly would be against Cleveland with Hunt and Chubb. I'm petrified of facing those two. That is a formidable duo in the NFL right now, and they're both very complementary to one another's skill sets. Chubb can really run in between the tackles well. Kareem Hunt catching passes out of the backfield has been fantastic for Cleveland. So I agree with you that there are some reasons to be a little bit concerned about the run defense as well. Clyde Edwards-Helaire looked pretty much like Barry Sanders, Barry Sanders light, I guess you could say, when we played them earlier this season. But this is a much different Buffalo Bills team. Covering this team for you has to be a true blessing for you this season, despite the weird year that has been 2020. This has been a awesome Buffalo Bills football season. But last and certainly not least, before we wrap things up, I would like a keys to victory. I want Ryan Talbot to give me some keys to victory to the Bills beating the Miami Dolphins week 17.
I think it's going to be depending on the run game. The run game has to get going. And I think that this is a scenario where if there's one position group that plays the bulk of the game, it's going to be the running backs. TJ Yeldon, had COVID or tested positive for COVID recently. No idea. Even obviously if he's off the list and everything else, you don't know how that affects you in terms of playing a full game or playing in a game. So I really think the Bills would be leaning on Zach Moss, Devin Singletary, and to a lesser extent, you'll probably see Tywan Jones get some carries as well because, by position, offensive position, he is a running back. I think that the Bills would have to be dominant on the ground in that second half to be able to beat Miami because, in my opinion, and Sean McDermott is keeping his plans close to the vest, which is no surprise. I think you will not see the starters any longer than the first half, at least the key starters. I think a guy like Josh Allen might be gone by the end of the first quarter. Same with Stephon Diggs, if you even are going to play them for an extended period of time. So you're going to have to lean on the run game to hold off Miami. It could be a low-scoring affair. On the other side, Tua has not shown the willingness to necessarily stretch the field on a regular basis. It's been dink and dunk, 4.5 yard average in two of these games or around that in the game against the Broncos where he really struggled, throwing for less than 100 yards against the Raiders. Still getting very confused by some of the looks that he's getting. I still think Buffalo's number twos on defense can confuse him, can get after him. That's going to give guys like Daryl Johnson and AJ Epineza longer periods of run on defense because you're not going to want Jerry Hughes and Mario Addison out there for extended time. So I think you can get pressure up front. I think the linebackers, even if you take your Edmonds and Milano off the field at a certain point in time, I feel like AJ Klein can, obviously we saw what a hot streak he was on at one point this year in his play, and the rest of that unit can do pretty well in that regard too. Secondary, Josh Norman and Levi Wallace as your top two cornerbacks is not the same as having Trey White out there, but you can get some play out of that unit as well. And then Dodson is who I kept trying to think of right there at linebacker as well, and I was going blank for a second. So even Dodson, I'd like to see him get an extended time out there to see what he can do.
Yeah, I'm all with you. I agree. I'd love to see their defense really frustrate Tua, and it seems like it's been easy for Tua to get frustrated as a rookie with his unwillingness to stretch the field. They have one quarterback who is afraid to make a mistake, a young gun that's afraid to make a mistake, and then they won't have a gunslinger available because Ryan Fitzpatrick tested positive for COVID. I feel like Fitz should be their starter. Obviously won't be because of the COVID stuff, but just in general with this whole Tua Fitz quarterback controversy, if you want to call it that, I'm all in with Fitz. I'm glad, though, that Miami hasn't started Fitz because I think he does give them a better chance to win, and I don't want to see Miami win. You don't want to see Miami win either, but I think Buffalo is going to win this one, and I'm excited, man. This has been a very strange year, I'm sure, for you as well, covering the team, and with all these COVID designations for the players and everything, it has to be a busy, busy year for you. But, Ryan, I really appreciate you tuning in. I'll let you get to the New Year's Rockin' Eve festivities. And thanks for hopping on, Ryan. It's always a pleasure chatting with you. Very knowledgeable and insightful commentary, as always.
Yeah, I appreciate you having me on.
Awesome. Take care, buddy. Go Bills.